Okay, there's another Survivor episode down. Unfortunately, I watched this a while ago and hadn't had a chance to talk about it until now, but obviously I wanted to be able to touch on it. I just had a lot going on, so I wasn't able to get around to it till now. Yeah, obviously the biggest headline of the episode is the conversation at the final tribal council here, where we had the racial discussion, which was basically inspired when they walked in and saw Roxroy had just been voted out. And so you had Chanel and Roxroy right next to each other, first two members of the jury. This, I guess, sparked something in Drea's mind where she's just like, her mind starts racing. Now, what's interesting is we don't know if ahead of time if she had an inkling that she might be voted out here, or if she was more comfortable until she saw Roxroy was there, and then that kind of had, like, everything got thrown out the window. She was like, okay, I always thought for sure he was safe, so now if I thought for sure he was safe, then maybe I'm not so safe. And then also seeing the status quo being upheld, so to speak, of two black people voted out back to back, and then the idea that she could potentially be next as a result of like this shakes up everything in her mind, right? And I think that's a completely fair perspective to have. And the biggest thing I think most people can reconcile with is that she was right. Like, she was right. She would have been the third black person voted out in a row if she hadn't played her idol and this whole conversation unfolded. So I think it's completely fair that she came to that conclusion. And obviously where the conversation gets hairy is when people misinterpret things, where they're like, they say, like, they think her talking about this is inferring that the tribe or the cast are voting in a racial manner, systematically against black people or something. And that's not really what she's saying. She's saying there is a history in the past where there will be like a series of people of color getting voted out back to back. And it's funny because they didn't see season 41, and but that did happen in that season. Though in that season it was actually a legit alliance between the black people, but it did happen. It was back to back to back after they turned on Shan. But yeah, I guess that's kind of Jonathan's perspective, and that's one that a lot of people will take if you aren't like looking at it closely enough, I guess. And also, to be fair, Jonathan has been a joy to watch all season. He's shown to be a nice guy through like many situations. And all around has added a lot to the season. This was obviously his worst episode of the season. He was not shown in the best light, but I think people are obviously too quick to jump like on someone like that. I don't think there's any reason to do that. Unfortunately, the internet discourse kind of tends to go that way recently. Especially when race is brought up, if it's like seeing like that you're somehow in opposition to that, even if it's just Jonathan's perspective, which seems to not be in opposition to it, but just seems to be defensive or not completely looking into all the nuances of the issue. People take that and immediately take that as an opportunity to jump, and it's like, okay, I'm out on Jonathan now. It's like, come on. If he had doubled down or said something actually racially abhorrent, then that would be another thing. But from everything we saw, it seems like he was just misinterpreting it, and it is completely fair also for him, like, if he did think, we know he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. Also, we've seen that on display in this episode where he wanted to make a big move, and his strategic prowess was not all there, and how we navigated it socially was not the best. But so you might just not be viewing it in the smartest way possible, which is fair. But to shun someone and like say, I'm out on him, we're anti-Jonathan now just because of that, is definitely not the way to handle that, because that'll make people even more against wanting to understand the issues, because they'll see it as such like a hostile issue that they can't even grow from it. Obviously, the biggest no-no was when he did say that Treo, he was like, you are being aggressive, when she was like, you're making it seem like I'm being aggressive, and he was like, you are being aggressive. he's really not thinking these things through. Not a good look there. But in terms of the actual what he was saying, I think it is fair to, especially in a nationally televised show, to just be extra defensive about being called racist like that publicly, which is how, obviously not looking at it super intelligently, that's how he interpreted it as. He was like, okay, Drea is calling me racist. He's saying that we're voting people out because they're black. When we know his motivations, and they seem pretty valid in the confessionals where he's talking about this is time to make a big move. She has the advantages, and so now's the time to strike Andrea. So that seems valid in that way. And so he's probably, it's an instant emotional response where he's like, he's furious. He's like, no, this is completely a strategic move, and she's making it something it's not. But he just needs to take a step back and look at the actual issue and see it's completely fair. Like, she's having an emotional response of her own. Not only that, but it's not even like she's having this whole emotional response when it was going to just be Tori or something. It was 100% going to be Drea if she did not play her idol. So it's valid in that way. Even if it's not racially motivated, the fact that she didn't want to be the third black person voted out in a row and contribute to that and leave only one black person left in the game, it's obviously an element to consider for her, and it ultimately saved her. Now, obviously, where Jonathan went wrong in showing that this was not a bad episode for him, just like in the grand scheme of things, but also just shows that he's not a great game player outside of the challenges. At least when he tried this big move, is like he wasn't handling different personalities well. He was being a little too bossy. Though he was in a tribe of all women, and he's this huge dude, so it's easy for it to come off that way as well. But he was definitely not handling it well, and he also made Marianne the decoy boot when he easily could have just made that Tori, and it probably makes his life a lot easier in how this plays out. Ultimately, would it have been nicer to get a grander apology from Jonathan? Yeah. There's also a lot on the cutting room floor out there. I wonder how much they got into outside of what they showed. But ultimately, I didn't see if he posted on social media or anything about it. I don't know. But ultimately, I'm just looking forward to seeing how the rest of the season plays out, because it almost this changes the perception of Jonathan in a lot of ways, especially in the edit. So I'm interested if that's affecting his position in the game too. He still would be like the clear next target, you would think, in a vote. So we'll see how that plays out. But I'm still excited to see how it goes from here. Now with Drea, with this rejuvenated, renewed sense of life, where she's like, she was so shaken out by this tribal council, and now suddenly she's like, she probably got nothing to lose because she would have been voted out. So seeing that come to blows with all these interesting, diverse personalities we got going on. Omar, Hi, Romeo, and then the Mike and Jonathan of it all. I'm really, the only thing I'm not thrilled about Drea staying around is because that could mean like doom for Mike potentially, because she does have that knowledge is power advantage. If she was voted out, all the nonsense would have been voted out with her. Well, most of it. But yeah, the fact that Mike has this idol and he's the second to Jonathan basically, and people probably see that way, that could spell danger for him as well. Especially if Jonathan does win another challenge and they were looking at him and it's like, oh, who's the next best bet? Let's get Mike. He's got an idol. And then Drea will want to do the whole knowledge is power on him, and it could just be devastating for him. So my prediction from the very beginning when he got that idol in the pre-merge is that it could be bad for him in the long run and paint a target on his back that wouldn't have been there otherwise. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see it play out though. I'm still rooting heavily for Mike. I'd love to see Mike win. In terms of my draft I did with the family, I have Hi and Omar on that, as well as Lindsay. This was a great episode for Lindsay also. She handled things well. But I have those three on my tribe, or on my team. And so I wouldn't mind any of them doing well as well. And they've been Hai and Omar especially have been given a lot this season, so I'm excited to see him play out. I was terrified that Mike was actually going to get seared in this spot similarly, but luckily it seemed like he was out of danger completely. But if they had the same idea, they could have been like, oh, well, let's get him out with his idol. Well, he has no idea. And he's a similar like social player to Nasir as well. It's interesting that Romeo was like a dead man walking on the one. Oh, by the way, the whole idea is that they split up into two tribes and did the two tribal councils again. The first one, Roxroy get voted out. The second one, Tori ultimately gets voted out, in which they definitely should have played it out naturally and not just said, I hate when they disrupt the whole process like that. I much would have preferred them to actually go and vote, because I just think it gets hairy when you do that. The sanctity of the game and all that. And then the shot in the dark was kind of an awkward thing. If that had worked, it would have been like a big rough spot on the game's history for sure, because it would have been like, would she have known to play it if we didn't go into this whole thing and broken down the whole process? So luckily it did not work out that way, but still weird. So you had the two tribals. Romeo was a clear odd man out on the first one, which consisted of Mike, Romeo, Hai, Roxroy, and Omar. So Romeo was obviously on the outs. Omar wanted to get Roxroy out, ultimately. He saw that. So this seems to be another one mostly orchestrated by Omar. And that he saw Romeo as someone that would work for him, whereas Roxroy would be someone who would never really work with what he had in mind, this whole guys alliance and all that. So Hai and Romeo were on board with that, but Hai wanted to reach out to Mike and not leave him on the outs so that they'd be able to work together still. And so they did. Mike was opposed because he thought it would make him look less trustworthy in the eyes of the alliance on the other side, which is interesting because they both kind of like harmoniously, separately each had decision brewing to vote out the one of their alliance anyway. Like they both had their obvious options in Romeo and Tori, but it was going to be Roxroy and Drea. And then ultimately, Roxroy being voted out is what tipped everything into falling back into Tori. But I'm really interested to see the fallout and all of that, especially with Drea's response to all the people that voted Roxroy out. But I love Mike. Like Mike's been navigating this well. You know, he's pushed back when he felt like he needed to for Chanel, and then he took a step back when he felt like it wasn't his place to press, like with Roxroy. So he's not really like doing anything too loosey goosey about it, you know. So Hai and Jonathan won immunity both in the super fast challenge they had. Everyone was dropping really quick, and Jonathan found himself in a spot where he wanted to make a big move, which I think is often fair. When you win immunity, that's the time. If you want to do something aggressive, that's the time to do it, especially of a person of his threat level, you know. Unfortunately, he just didn't handle it well. He didn't handle personalities well. Like Marianne felt like she was being bossed around. Lindsay wasn't feeling him, and then he also didn't play his cards well, and saying that telling Marianne that she was the decoy vote when it could have been Tori. Ultimately, it doesn't pan out. But I admire the actual thought of like, you have immunity, now's the time to strike. Again, interested to see how this develops. We've got some interesting people left on the board, and so sure some fun times ahead of us. Okay, thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Click all the links in the description for our social media, and if you want to leave any feedback for us, all right. And if you like this video, feel free to check out more from us. We do Survivor every week, including we just started Survivor Guatemala. Go check out the first episode of Survivor Guatemala, and yeah, until next time.